It was just another Tuesday, buried under a pile of paperwork at my desk, the kind of day that drags on with stale coffee and the hum of office air conditioning clinging to my skin. I was chewing on a pen long out of ink, my eyes burning from staring at spreadsheets, when my phone lit up with a FaceTime call from my 15-year-old daughter, Sophie. I expected a goofy vacation update, maybe a shot of her laughing with her cousins or showing off some quirky souvenir from her trip with my parents and brother Mark. But what I got instead stopped my heart. Sophie, pale and quiet, whispering that she'd broken her leg. My parents and brother? They didn't take her to the ER. They told her to tough it out, forced her to walk for 3 hours on a shattered leg, dismissing her pain as drama. I didn't scream, though every fiber of me wanted to. Instead, I acted because no one gets to ignore my daughter's suffering. 4 days later, they were the ones panicking. This is the story of how I fought for her and why I'll never let neglect slide again. The day started like any other, with the dull hum of my office in suburban Chicago, where I was drowning in spreadsheets and the faint smell of burnt coffee from the break room. My mind was half on my work, half on my daughter, Sophie, who was 800 miles away on a spring break trip with my parents, my brother Mark, and her cousins, Haley and Ben. It was her first big adventure without me, a chance to bond with family. At historic sites and bustling street markets, she'd begged to go, her eyes bright with excitement, and I'd reluctantly agreed, packing her suitcase with allergy meds, a charger, and enough snacks to survive a week. I couldn't join her not because I didn't want to, but because flying sends me into a tailspin. It's not just nerves, it's a full-blown phobia, the kind that leaves my palms sweaty and my chest tight at the mere thought of an airport. 10 years ago, I swore off planes after a panic attack at a boarding gate, and since then, I've stuck to trains, cars, anything that keeps my feet on the ground. Sophie knew this, and so did my family. They'd promised to look after her, and I wanted to believe them. I was expecting a cheerful FaceTime from Sophie, maybe a quick glimpse of her haggling for a trinket or laughing over some weird snack she'd found. So when her name flashed across my phone screen at PM, I smiled, ready for a dose of her infectious energy. But the moment I answered, my stomach dropped. There was no smile, no chatter. Sophie sat rigid on the edge of a hotel bed. In some far-off city, her voice barely above a whisper. "Hey, Mom," she said, her words heavy with exhaustion. "Can I tell you something, but promise not to freak out?" My heart raced, but I kept my voice steady. "What's going on, kiddo?" She hesitated, then turned the camera to her leg, propped on a cheap hotel pillow. It was a nightmare, swollen, red and purple, the skin stretched tight over her ankle and shin like it might burst. "It wasn't a bruise, it was a disaster. I think I broke it," she said, her voice small but steady. My mind went blank for a split second, like a computer crashing. "What do you mean you think you broke it?" I managed to ask already. Standing, pacing my tiny cubicle, she explained she'd fallen the day before, tripping on the stairs at some old palace they were touring. I sank back into my chair, the weight of her words pulling me down. "Okay, who's looked at it?" I asked, hoping for a shred of reassurance. "Grandma, Grandpa, and Uncle Mark," she said. My breath caught. "They'd seen it," she nodded. "They didn't think it looked that bad at first. They said it was just bruising." I blinked, trying to process. "So, they didn't take you to a doctor?" "No." She shook her head, her eyes fixed on the floor. "No, we kept going. I just walked through it." I repeated, my voice sharper than I intended. "How long?" She swallowed. 3 hours, maybe more, my vision blurred, not from tears but from a quiet, burning rage. They told me I was overreacting, she added, her tone so casual it made my stomach churn. They said I'd feel better once the tour was over. I shut my eyes, trying to keep the pieces of myself together. And now it hurts a lot more, she admitted. Where are they now? I asked, dreading the answer. Out, she said. They said I could stay at the hotel and rest, alone. In another state, a 15-year-old girl with a leg that looked like it belonged in a medical textbook left to fend for herself. I stared at the screen, my daughter's pale face staring back, and something inside me snapped not loudly, but with a cold, unshakable resolve. Don't move, I told her. I'm coming to get you. The moment Sophie's words sank in 3 hours of walking on a broken leg, left alone in a hotel room, something inside me shifted. It wasn't just anger. It was a fierce, unshakable resolve, the kind that drowns out doubt and fear. My daughter was hurting, dismissed by the very people I'd trusted to care for her, and I wasn't going to sit in my Chicago cubicle and let it slide. Flying terrified me, had for a decade, ever since a panic attack at O'Hare left me shaking at a boarding gate, swearing I'd never set foot on a plane again. But this wasn't about me. It was about Sophie, pale and alone, her voice trembling through a FaceTime screen. I opened my laptop, my hand steady despite the knot in my chest, and searched for flights. One popped up, leaving in 90 minutes from Midway. No time to overthink, no room for fear. I booked it, my fingers clicking faster than my brain could protest, and told Sophie, I'm coming. Stay put. I tried calling my parents first, my heart pounding as I paced the office. Voicemail. I dialed again. Voicemail again. Frustration clawed at me, but I wasn't surprised. They'd always been good at dodging accountability. Then I called my brother, Mark, the golden child who could do no wrong in our family's eyes. He picked up, his voice annoyingly chipper, like we were catching up over coffee. Hey, how's it going? He said, oblivious. I didn't waste time. You left Sophie alone in a hotel with a possibly broken leg. Silence. Then, she said she was fine, he replied, his tone casual, like he was brushing off a spilled drink. She can't walk, Mark. She's in pain, he sighed, that old, familiar sigh that said I was blowing things out of proportion. She's always been a little sensitive, he said. It's probably just a sprain. The swelling didn't even start until last night. I gripped my phone so hard I thought it might crack. You made her walk for 3 hours, I said, my voice low but sharp. We didn't make her, he shot back. She's 15. She wanted to keep going. I hung up without another word, his excuses ringing hollow. I grabbed my bag, slung my laptop under my arm, and stormed out of my cubicle. My boss looked up as I burst into his office, his eyebrows raised. Family emergency, I said, already? Halfway out the door. What kind? He started, but I didn't stop to explain. I was done justifying myself to people who didn't get it. In the elevator, I booked a cab to Midway, texting Sophie as the door slid shut. I'm coming. Don't move. Stay in bed. Her reply was a single heart emoji, a tiny red flicker that carried me through the chaos. The cab ride was a blur, Chicago skyline fading as I stared at that heart, my mind racing with images of Sophie's swollen leg, her quiet voice saying she didn't want to overreact. I wasn't just fighting for her now. I was fighting every time I'd been told I was too much, too sensitive, too dramatic. At the airport, security was a nightmare line snaking through the terminal, my hands shaking as I fumbled with my ID. The old panic crept up, that familiar tightness in my chest, the urge to turn back and drive the 800 miles instead. But I pictured Sophie alone in that hotel room, her leg ballooning with every passing hour. I pushed through, dodging travelers, my sneakers pounding the floor like I was running from something or toward it. I made it to the gate with minutes to spare, no luggage, no plan, just a boarding pass and a fire in my gut. I hated flying, hated the way it made my stomach lurch and my palms sweat, but I hated what they'd done to my daughter more. As I boarded the plane, I didn't look back. This wasn't about fear anymore. It was about showing up for the one person who needed me most. As the plane hummed through the clouds, I gripped the armrest, my knuckles white, every small jolt sending my stomach into freefall. I hadn't flown in over a decade, not since a panic attack at O'Hare left me swearing off airports for good. The woman next to me slept soundly, a bag of pretzels balanced on her chest, oblivious to the turbulence that made my jaw clench. I envied her calm, but my mind was too busy wrestling with fear of the plane. Yes, but also fear that I'd failed Sophie by letting her go on this trip. Staring out at the endless sky, I couldn't stop thinking about her, alone in that hotel room, her legs swollen and bruised, dismissed by my family as overreacting. It was a word I knew too well, one that had followed me since childhood like a shadow I couldn't shake. Growing up in our small Midwestern town, I was the sensitive one, the kid who cried during thunderstorms and got dizzy on swings. My allergies: cats, pollen, grass made every backyard barbecue a minefield. Loud noises gave me headaches, and once I fainted on a family hike, only to have my mom hand me half a water bottle and tell me to toughen up. My brother, Mark, 3 years older, was the golden child, athletic, loud, the life of every gathering. When he sprained his ankle, he was carried home like a hero. When I complained I was too much, by 10, they labeled me the drama queen, my tears dismissed as fake, my fears embarrassing. I still remember Mark filming me sobbing on a turbulent flight when I was 10, then playing it at Thanksgiving with added sound effects, everyone laughing as I burned with shame. My mother's voice cut deepest. "You need to grow out of this." I never did. I just learned to hide it, to stop reacting, to watch and wait. That silence shaped me. I left home, studied law, and became a criminal investigator in Chicago, a career that surprised everyone. "Isn't that intense for someone like you?" they'd ask, meaning too delicate to fragile. But I wasn't fragile, I was driven. I knew what it felt like to be disbelieved, to have your truth ignored. My work was about evidence, logic, facts that didn't need permission to exist. I thought it might earn my family's respect, make them see me as capable, not the anxious kid they mocked. It didn't. To them, I was still one meltdown away from falling apart. When Sophie was born, everything changed. She was quiet, thoughtful, with a furrowed brow that seemed to carry the weight of the world. She was like me, and I swore she'd never feel what I did. When my dad called her drama queen too, oh, I shut it down. When Mark's daughter, Haley, was praised for being feisty while Sophie was labeled too emotional, I stepped in. I wouldn't let them diminish her, but kids notice what isn't said. Sophie felt the silences, just like I had, and when she begged to go on this trip with my parents, Mark and her cousins, I hesitated. My phobia wasn't just about flying, it was about trusting them with her. They'd promised to care for her, and I wanted to believe they'd changed, that they'd see Sophie for the bright, kind girl she was, not a reflection of the daughter they never understood. I packed her bag, sent extra money for her cousin's plane tickets, and waved her off, ignoring the pit in my stomach. Now, on this plane, that pit was a chasm. Sophie's voice echoed in my head. I didn't want to ruin the trip. It broke me because I'd said it too, 1,000 times, swallowing my pain to keep the peace. I'd tried to break that cycle for her, but I'd failed by letting her go. As the plane descended, my fear didn't matter. Sophie did. I wasn't just flying to her, I was flying to rewrite the story they'd tried to write for us both. The plane touched down, and my heart was still racing, not from the flight but from the image of Sophie's swollen leg burned into my mind. I barely remembered the cab ride to the hotel, my thoughts a blur of worry and resolve. When I reached her room, Sophie opened the door herself, pale and leaning against the frame, her hair tangled like she hadn't brushed it in days. She looked at me, eyes wide, and whispered, "You actually came." Those words hit like a punch. Her surprise wasn't gratitude but disbelief, as if she'd braced herself to be let down. I wrapped her in a gentle hug, whispering, "Of course I came. You're the only reason I'd get on a plane." She gave a shaky laugh when I added, "Please don't make me do it again." Getting her shoes on took forever. Her foot was so swollen we left one off. As I tied the laces, I asked how it happened. Her answer stopped me cold. It wasn't just a fall. Her cousin Ben had pushed her as a joke on those palace stairs, and my parents and Mark saw it happen. The hospital, a small community outside the city, the staff moved quickly. Sophie's leg looked worse under the fluorescent lights, like it was screaming for attention no one had given it. The X-ray confirmed a tibia fracture, non-displaced but serious. The doctor's words, "You're lucky it didn't shift," hung heavy, a warning of what could have been if she'd walked another day. Sophie glanced at me when the nurse asked how it happened, and I nodded. "Tell the truth." "My cousin pushed me," she said, her voice steady. "No tears, just facts." I fell down some stairs, the nurse's pen scratched faster, her face unreadable. When the doctor left, I turned to Sophie, my voice firm but calm. "Tell me everything." She recounted the fall, how she'd begged to go to the hospital, but my parents said there was no time. Non-refundable tour tickets trumped her pain. They gave her ice and told her to walk it off. The next day, when she couldn't, they left her alone in the hotel to go on a winery tour, dumping her with the other kids. I stepped into the hallway, my hands shaking as I dialed my dad. He answered, his tone cautious, already sensing trouble. "Is she okay?" he asked, not out of concern, but because he knew I'd uncovered their negligence. "She has a fracture," I said. "Ben pushed her, and you all saw it." A pause. "It didn't look that bad," he mumbled. "He was just playing." I cut him off. "You made her walk for 3 hours on a broken leg." "I'm pressing charges." His voice rose. "You're dragging the family into court over this?" I didn't flinch. "Yes." For Sophie, I hung up, my decision made. Back in the room, Sophie smiled faintly when I told her Grandpa called me irrational. "You're right," she said, and her laugh, though weak, felt like a small victory. The legal process wasn't dramatic, no TV courtroom theatrics, just paperwork and weary lawyers in a county courthouse. But the evidence was undeniable. A tourist video showing Ben shoving Sophie, my parents and Mark standing by, doing nothing. I sent it to my lawyer, who gave a thumbs up and filed for child endangerment and medical neglect. The verdict came quietly but hit hard, fines that left my family reeling, and for Mark, a PE teacher, a child endangerment charge cost him his job. Within weeks, they moved to a smaller house in a rougher part of town, scraping by. My phone buzzed with calls from aunts, cousins, even an uncle I hadn't heard from since 2006, all pleading to drop the case, to keep the family together. I shared the footage, the X-rays, the truth. Slowly, the calls stopped. They saw what I saw. A child ignored, A cycle of neglect I refused to let continue. Sophie and I were done being silenced. After the dust settled, Sophie's leg healed, the fracture fading into a memory with no lingering pain. But what stayed with her was a quiet strength, a confidence that didn't need to shout to be heard. One night, as we folded laundry in our small Chicago apartment, she paused, holding a t-shirt, and said, "I think I would have let it go." She looked at me, her eyes steady. "But I'm glad you didn't," I nodded, my heart swelling. "You should never have to scream to be believed." Later, she showed me a text from her cousin Ben, an apology that felt genuine, no adult prompting. Behind it, she didn't reply, just shrugged and said, "I think he means it." That was enough for her, a line drawn, a boundary set. For me, the change was deeper. I stopped answering my family's calls, not out of anger but clarity. No more waiting for apologies that wouldn't come. No more hoping they'd see me or Sophie for who we are. The silence wasn't heavy, it was peace, the kind I'd never known. I still hate flying, but I've done it since, for ditto, for court, for work, for a weekend getaway with Sophie. Each takeoff twists my stomach, but I board anyway, because Sophie's worth it. This story is for you parents, creators, fighters for justice. Did I go too far or just far enough? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit subscribe, and ring the bell for more stories of resilience and truth.